Hello everyone, how are we all doing? Today I'm going to be going over the top 5 mistakes beginners make when mastering their tracks. So the very first thing I wanted to talk about for beginner master track mistakes is doing too much for the master or not doing enough. So when I first started mixing and mastering my songs, well, just trying to get the gist of how to master my songs, I was more focused on the vocal mix and less focused on the master, which is the whole mix. And I got to a point where I didn't even realize the importance of mastering until later on in my music making journey. So before, what I used to do was just like use one preset, like one multi-band compression preset, and I just used to throw that on there. But my main focus was making sure that my vocal chain was right, my background vocals were right, and that was literally it. And the problem with that was I was never able to achieve the sound I was going for, which is what I was listening to on the radio, like all those different types of professional mixes and masters. I was never able to get close to that because I wasn't even doing like the basic steps. So make sure you do the basic steps as far as like using the proper equipment that you need on the master. For your master tracks, I definitely suggest using at least like a multi-band compressor, limiter, and an EQ. That's like the basic of the basic of the basic of the basic. That's like the bare minimum for the master track. You just like at least have to have that. If you don't have anything else, at least have that. But at the same time, when you start to add a bunch of different plugins on your master track that you don't even know what they really do, you have to actually understand what these plugins are doing in order to put them on your tracks. And if you don't understand what these plugins are doing, totally avoid them until you figure out exactly what they do and then use them accordingly to your desired sound. So yeah, always keep that in mind. Try not to overdo it and keep it basic when necessary. So the second thing I wanted to talk about for beginner master track mistakes is proper use of the multi-band compressor on a master track. So whenever we use a multi-band compressor on the master track, the reason why it's so important is because it allows us to compress down different frequency ranges, which will give us a greater level of tonal balance versus just trying to use one, because we can ensure that each frequency range is getting compressed properly, and it just helps our master sound a whole lot more balanced and close together, which is really why this is important. But the only way to achieve that nice balanced sound and glued together master is figuring out how to use this thing properly. And a lot of people don't understand how to listen for the sounds in each frequency range and adjust those sounds and get it to sound like how they want to through attack and release, which is how we fix these problems. And then on top of that, you have to get a set amount of gain reduction for each frequency range, and it can't go over like a certain minimum. So for instance, in each frequency range, I try to go for no more than -2 decibels, because if I do any more than that, it'll start to sound like I'm taking too much away from my master, or it just sounds like I'm doing too much with the compressor, which is what we want to avoid. So normally with the master track, we want to try to go for the most minimal adjustments as we possibly can. So when we start to do too much gain reduction in these frequency ranges, it's going to start to make our whole entire master track sound a bit out of whack, which is definitely what we want to avoid. So yeah, a multi-band compressor on the master track, really important step for anybody trying to get a good sounding master. A lot of people like to just use a normal compressor too, which is totally fine in some situations. If you're in a bind and you want to just like hurry up and get a song done, hurry up and get the mix and master done, using a multi-band compressor can be good for that. But if you want to achieve the highest level of balance within your master, you definitely will always want to use a multi-band compressor instead of a regular compressor. So keep that in mind. So third beginner master track mistakes is not paying enough attention to how much output you're getting from your master. The reason why this is so important is because a lot of streaming platforms like Spotify or Apple Music require a certain level of loudness, and if you don't meet these loudness requirements, it'll make your song sound a lot quieter than what you originally like listened to whenever finishing your master. Going back and listening to it on those platforms, it'll make your song sound a lot more quieter, and you'll just really be disappointed because to the human ear, a lot of times louder means better. We always want to make sure we have a dB meter or a loof meter or whatever you want to call it to ensure that we can see how many loops we're getting. For like streaming platform, for instance, like Spotify, the loof requirements is like -14. So always keep that in mind. So the third thing I wanted to talk about to get your masters to sound better is using a little bit of EQ. It doesn't hurt to use a little bit of EQ on the master, mainly just because we want to make sure that we have total control over all the frequencies across the frequency spectrum for both our vocal mix and our instrumental tracks. So when you mix these both together with the dynamic EQ on the master, you can ensure that your frequencies are molded into the shape that you want them to be molded in, which is really nice. As you can see right here, what I've done, I've came over here and added 2 different EQs, one dynamic EQ and one regular EQ. I use the dynamic EQ for the low mid and the high mids, getting those frequencies under control. I gave them a upward expansion mode on this dynamic EQ, which will give those frequencies gain whenever the EQ detects them throughout the mix. And over here for my equalizer, it's my normal equalizer. I just did the basics, took out the low end by a little bit, and then I boosted up the high end, just like how we're always supposed to be doing. So the last thing to do that'll make your master sound better is honestly just turning down the instrumental within your mix. And what this will do is just give your vocals a little bit more room to shine, and it'll prevent your instrumental track from overpowering your lead vocals, which is the absolute last thing that you want. Sounds totally unprofessional. You definitely want to avoid that. Make sure you always turn down your instrumental track and just do it bit by bit. Like when I say bit by bit, I mean like percentage by percentage, because you kind of have to hear what is the exact spot, like what is the loudest I can have this instrumental track to the point where it won't overtake the frequencies in my lead vocals. Keep that in mind. But all right, everyone, those are my 5 tips on getting a better sounding master. Now, if you're a beginner wondering how to mix your vocals with stock plugins inside FL Studio, make sure you hit the link in my description so I can give you a detailed step-by-step guide on how to do just that, which I can guarantee will 5 times the speed in which you progress. But all right, everyone, I hope you got a lot of value out of this video. If you did, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe. I'll catch you all in the next one.